Immediately after seeing a Canadian ad, Trump canceled all trade with Canada. Then he backtracked and stated he was penalizing Canada by adding a 10% tariff. Do you think if a doctor prescribed Trump Xanax, he would cease all crazy maneuvering? Probably not. It would be nice though. The first clip I will show you will be of the ad that made Trump mad. The second clip will be of the original speech from Reagan. Gotta warn you though, it's a sad reminder how a rational president behaves and speaks. In the last clip, a reporter investigates Trump's statement that the recording of Reagan in the ad is fake. This is only my second video. Please like and subscribe. Also, I love to hear feedback. So please leave comments. I will also celebrate each milestone of subscribers. I will also celebrate each milestone of subscribers. Much more to come. Immediately after seeing a Canadian ad, Trump canceled all trade with Canada. Then he backtracked and stated he was penalizing Canada by adding a 10% tariff. Do you think if a doctor prescribed Trump Xanax, he would cease all crazy maneuvering? Probably not. It would be nice though. The first clip I will show you will be the ad that made Trump mad. The second clip will be of the original speech from Reagan. Gotta warn you though, it's a sad reminder how a rational president behaves and speaks. In the last clip, a reporter investigates Trump's statement that the recording of Reagan in the ad is fake. This is only my second video. Please like and subscribe. Also, I love to hear feedback. So please leave comments. I will also celebrate each milestone of subscribers. Much more to come.
When someone says, let's impose tariffs on foreign imports, it looks like they're doing the patriotic thing by protecting American products and jobs. And sometimes for a short while it works, but only for a short time. But over the long run, such trade barriers hurt every American worker and consumer. High tariffs inevitably lead to retaliation by foreign countries and the triggering of fierce trade wars. Then the worst happens. Markets shrink and collapse, businesses and industries shut down, and millions of people lose their jobs. Throughout the world, there's a growing realization that the way to prosperity for all nations is rejecting protectionist legislation and promoting fair and free competition. America's jobs and growth are at stake. My fellow are at stake. My fellow Americans, Prime Minister Nakasone of Japan will be visiting me here at the White House next week. It's an important visit because while I expect to take up our relations with our good friend Japan, which overall remain excellent, recent disagreements between our two countries on the issue of trade will also be high on our agenda. As perhaps you've heard, last week I placed new duties on some Japanese products in response to Japan's inability to enforce their trade agreement with us on electronic devices called semiconductors. Now, imposing such tariffs or trade barriers and restrictions of any kind are steps that I am loath to take, and in a moment I'll mention the sound economic reasons for this, that over the long run such trade barriers hurt every American worker and consumer. But the Japanese semiconductors were a special case. We had clear evidence that Japanese companies were engaging in unfair trade practices that violated an agreement between Japan and the United States. We expect our trading partners to live up to their agreements. As I've often said, our commitment to free trade is also a commitment to fair trade. But you know, in imposing these tariffs, we were just trying to deal with a particular problem, not begin a trade war. So next week, I'll be giving Prime Minister Nakasone this same message. We want to continue to work cooperatively on trade problems and want very much to lift these trade restrictions as soon as evidence permits. We want to do this because we feel both Japan and the United States have an obligation to promote the prosperity and economic development that only free trade can bring. Now, that message of free trade is one I conveyed to Canada's leaders a few weeks ago, and it was warmly received there. Indeed, throughout the world, there's a growing realization that the way to prosperity for all nations is rejecting protectionist legislation and promoting fair and free competition. Now, there are sound historical reasons for this. For those of us who lived through the Great Depression, the memory of the suffering it caused is deep and searing. And today, many economic analysts and historians argue that high tariff legislation passed back in that period, called the Smoot-Hawley Tariff, greatly deepened the Depression and prevented economic recovery. You see, at first, when someone says, let's impose tariffs on foreign imports, it looks like they're doing the patriotic thing by protecting American products and jobs. And sometimes for a short while it works, but only for a short time. What eventually occurs is, first, homegrown industries start relying on government protection in the form of high tariffs. They stop competing and stop making the innovative management and technological changes they need to succeed in world markets. And then, while all this is going on, something even worse occurs. High tariffs inevitably lead to retaliation by foreign countries and the triggering of fierce trade wars. The result is more and more tariffs, higher and higher trade barriers, and less competition. So soon, because of the prices made artificially high by tariffs that subsidize inefficiency and poor management, people stop buying. Then the worst happens. Markets shrink and collapse, businesses and industries shut down, and millions of people lose their jobs. The memory of all this occurring back in the 30s made me determined when I came to Washington to spare the American people the protectionist legislation that destroys prosperity. Now, it hasn't always been easy. There are those in the Congress, just as there were back in the 30s, who want to go for the quick political advantage, who risk America's prosperity for the sake of a short-term appeal to some special interest group, who forget that more than 5 million American jobs are directly tied to the foreign export business, and additional millions are tied to imports. Well, I've never forgotten those jobs, and on trade issues, by and large, we've done well. In certain select cases, like the Japanese semiconductors, we've taken steps to stop unfair practices against American products, but we've still maintained our basic long-term commitment to free trade and economic growth. So, with my meeting with Prime Minister Nakasone and the Venice Economic Summit coming up, it's terribly important not to restrict a president's options in such trade dealings with foreign governments. Unfortunately, some in the Congress are trying to do exactly that. I'll keep you informed on this dangerous legislation because it's just another form of protectionism, and I may need your help to stop it. Remember, America's jobs and growth are at stake. Until next week, thanks for listening, and God bless you.
Okay, I bet you weren't thinking the 1987 Ronald Reagan speech would cancel US trade talks with Canada, right? But here we are. Donald Trump has called the Ontario government's ad using Reagan talking about tariffs fake. And the Reagan Foundation says the ad has misrepresented the address. So let's compare. First off, the speech isn't fake, though it is edited. As you'll hear, the lines are used verbatim. Here's the ad.
High tariffs inevitably lead to retaliation.
And here's Reagan's speech.
High tariffs inevitably lead to retaliation.
Now, in the 1-minute ad, the order of some of the lines have been changed. For example, the opening line of the ad.
When someone says, let's impose tariffs on foreign imports,
it's said about 2.5 minutes into Reagan's speech.
When someone says, let's impose tariffs,
the following line in the ad.
But over the long run, such trade barriers hurt every American worker and consumer.
Was said more than a minute before in the speech. But are his words misrepresented in the ad as the Reagan Foundation claims?
Absolutely not. I think they're really just positioning themselves to avoid the wrath of the president.
That's Douglas Irwin, professor of economics from Dartmouth College and expert on U.S. trade history.
The ads does not misrepresent his views. He was very much in favor of free trade.
This 1987 speech was made when the Republican president had just imposed 100% tariffs on some Japanese electronics over what Reagan said was
clear evidence that Japanese companies were engaging in unfair trade practices.
But Reagan made it clear in this address that he wasn't into tariffs.
He didn't want to do that, but it was sort of forced under the circumstances of the time. But once the U.S. economy began to recover, he vetoed protectionist legislation coming from Congress. He opened up these trade negotiations with Canada and other countries to lead to freer trade.
So what about Trump's claims that Reagan loved tariffs?
No, actually, Reagan was a free trader. Sometimes people say, well, he was like Trump because he imposed the protectionism on the auto industry in the early 1980s. But once again, he did so reluctantly, whereas Trump is very enthusiastic and says this will be great for America.
And that 1987 radio message wasn't the only time the Republican president spoke out about tariffs. In 1988, Reagan said protectionism should really be called destructionism, due to the economic harm it can cause.
America's jobs, America's growth, America's future depend on trade that is free, open, and fair.
So why has Trump called out this ad?
Those ads are invoking sort of a Republican hero, Ronald Reagan, who still remains popular. But unfortunately, Trump's policies are so different from Reagan's that he doesn't like the comparison so much when the contradictions between the two are pointed out to him.